Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us for April 25th, 2022 regular council meeting. And I'd like to just start by respectfully acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. The week of April 24th to 30th is the National Volunteer Week in the city of Courtney. Our diverse volunteers sustain our community organization and events. They volunteer at our schools, at our hospitals, beautify our community, and mentor our children. Nationally, 13.3 million volunteers contribute 2.1 billion hours per year. We want to thank our volunteers for their incredible contributions to our community, and we had our flag raising today at City Hall to recognize them. So thanks for that. Coming up this week on April 28th is the day of mourning to honor workers killed, injured, or made ill at work. This is our opportunity to renew our commitment to health and safety in the workplace and to prevent further injuries, illnesses, and death. And obviously, it's important every year, but as we come out of our pandemic, that we're really cognizant of how we try to keep everybody as safe as possible. And lastly, the week of May 1st to 7th is Canadian Armed Forces Snowbirds Week in the city of Courtney, and we just want to thank them for their iconic military aerobautics team. And you may have seen them flying around already, and they're based out of Saskatchewan, but they'll be here until their training is complete. Welcome to the Snowbirds. And with that, we will, and for those three things, there are also going to be proclamations that go along with it. But we'll get into our regular council meetings from April 11th. Excellent. Awesome. Thanks for that. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none. Oh, hang on. Councillor Mourning, there was something I forgot.
Yeah, I think that it's being corrected by staff, but just that my activities report was omitted, but it's being added, I believe, or maybe it's already added to the minutes. Thank you.
I believe there's an amended agenda up that's good to go. So thanks for pointing that out and for staff to react. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Just on that subject, we did have a message from a citizen this week on a separate issue, but making reference to councillor activity reports. And she had actually looked in the minutes of the meeting for more detail on those specific reports. And I was able to explain that we have this process where those reports, if there are any, are submitted in writing, and we don't necessarily speak to them at the meeting, and therefore there aren't necessarily any details provided. So I just wanted to make that clear for anybody who might be looking in, who might be confused about the nature of those reports. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hillian. Appreciate that. And I don't see any further questions or comments at this point. And they are just minutes, so we'll expect that they'll be received unanimously by council. There were no late items, and we do have the council RCMP quarter report. Excellent. It's been moved and seconded, and I believe I can see Inspector Curvers.
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Yeah, we can see you and hear you perfectly.
I sent a report earlier today. I'm hoping that you have that report on the screen somewhere.
We're just bringing it up right now. Just give us a second.
Okay, if people can, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody can hear me, and I'll just start with this report, the City of Courtney. I kind of got this done so you can give you a correlation of how things work from year to year. So on this first calls for service, you can see the number of calls per month, and comparing 2019, 2020, 21 and 22, because our fiscal years is from April, we put that final 3 months in there for the fiscal year. And you can see the number of calls per month. It doesn't change too much. It kind of goes up and down with the type of calls for service we have. So that's kind of one of the graphs that kind of see how many files we have. In those circles, you'll see the numbers of how many files we have per month relative to the community. So on the next page, we went to, is someone changing page? There we go. So you can see we went to graphs just to give you kind of comparison what how we get the files on, and the number is on the left and then the month is down below. So for traffic complaints, 2019 is the gray. It kind of stays about 100 to 120 calls. 220 is a little bit more, and it all depends what happens in the community, that we have collisions or any kind of motor vehicle incidents that we have to respond to. So that kind of correlates to what we do. You can see for 2022, the few months for January to March, just hardly any calls for service for traffic related offenses. The next screen, impaired driving. Again, you can see the correlation from year to year. Again, for 2022, those 3 months, the stats are down. 2021, we had a big spike in September, October, November, and then it flattened out again. So that gives you kind of a comparison, the number of files we have. At the peak, we had 40 calls for impaired investigations for those 3 months. Sexual offenses, next screen. 2019 is 81, 2020, and then 2021 it went up. And I can't give you an answer why those go up. It's all a matter of just the call volume and the type of calls we receive. Next one, domestic violence. So for the months, again, you can see 2019, 2020, 21, and 2022. We have a significant number of domestic violence calls in the community that we respond to. Those typically are priority 1 and 2 calls that we're going to have an immediate response to. In the latter months of 2021, it went down to about 8, which is still a good number. And then it went up again for the following months. It stays kind of consistent, the number of calls we have per month for the type of files we have in this area. Next, drug trafficking, that has gone down. I don't know why it's gone down. It could be a correlation because of COVID, and a lot of individuals we are dealing with have been incarcerated. So that is could be a reason why that has gone down. And homeless camp data. Those are the number of camps we've located per month. And it's pretty consistent. And I know we have a pretty robust process in place with the bylaws to kind of deal with these matters. Next slide. So these are the type of calls we're dealing with when we go to the camps. Suspicious person, bylaw, trespass act, missing persons, check well-being, unspecified assistance, cause of disturbance, mental health act, and then mischief. So when we get called to investigate anything in these camps, these are the bulk of the files we're dealing with. Nothing that's overly serious or causes anybody kind of safety in certain areas. So that's where we're at with that. And that is it for those slides. We're just going to open it up for questions.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And we do have a question from Councillor Moore.
Great. Thank you, Inspector Curvers, for the report. Definitely some encouraging numbers, but then of course the assaults and the sex offenses was just up by 1, but in the quarter. But I guess I was curious, I know I've asked this before and it's really difficult to have any analysis of what's going on when numbers go up and down, but I was curious if you had anything you could point to. I know you can't reveal too much, but in terms of the assaults and the sexual assaults, if sometimes sexual assaults go up just because people feel more comfortable for whatever reason reporting. I didn't know if you had anything new implemented in that area that's working better and people are reporting more or whatever. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on those two areas in particular. Thank you.
Well, right now there's, I know Jeff did some statistical data on the calls for service and domestic violence. There's 16 less files in this quarter. I can't really put my finger on it, what causes that. I can say, and it's a possibility that with COVID, people are together longer periods of time and they're confined in a house and one thing leads to another. That could be a cause. Whether it goes down or up, I can't say. A lot of these are going to have contributing factors like alcohol or drugs and different mitigating things. We have to assess as well for any kind of investigation. But to put a finger on an actual cause for it to go up and down, I can't say.
The numbers trending down is a good sign in that, especially in that we're seeing an increase in our overall calls for service year to year over the past 5 years. So having those more serious offense numbers sort of drive down is a good sign for us, that's for sure.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And Councillor Theos.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the report. Earlier, you basically touched a little bit about the drug offenses, and I'm wondering if maybe, for instance, with the reduction of the break and enter offenses, if maybe there's been some prolific offenders that have been basically incarcerated also to see some success in seeing those numbers going down. But also I'm kind of curious about whether weather has a factor. If it was more rain during this last few months or colder weather compared to possibly summer warmer weather where you might see more people out and about. I don't know if that plays a factor. I'll just leave that with you for now, and then I have one more question after, if I may.
Yeah, weather really doesn't play a factor. I will tell you that because of COVID and certain resourcing issues, we moved our street crimes unit to the frontline policing to have more visibility and to have that frontline presence. They've been re-established, stood up again, and they are basically going to identify and deal with all our prolific offenders. Prolific offenders and drug use kind of go hand in hand. That's why they're one unit. So when we deal with our prolific offenders and we get rid of the B&Es and theft from cars and some of the petty crimes, that eliminates a portion of the drug offenses as well. So there is a correlation that way. And our folks in the office have been very good at putting people where they belong for a period of time. And that really trends down in the type of files we have in that area.
Thank you very much. And if I may have a follow-up question, I appreciate your answers in that regard. Having a greater presence downtown, we've talked in the past about a community policing station potentially. And I know when I was communicating with the Nanaimo community policing members, there was some talk about, maybe even downtown potentially could even donate one of their empty locations, because the trade-off is that they would get police presence downtown. And I think in the past we've touched on the community policing station with you, but do you feel that there's? I just wanted to be reminded whether you felt that there was value in investigating whether a community policing station could be effective in our community and in our downtown.
Absolutely. Anytime we have a presence, that really helps. Traditionally, we have in bigger detachments, they'll have members that are assigned to those positions, like community policing. Because of resource demands, we don't have that ability, but there is the ability to have people go there and do work and help out. Traditionally, those offices are staffed by volunteers, like RCMP volunteers, and they kind of do the front end loading, but we do have individuals there that can do a bulk of the paperwork. And if there's a question that can't be answered by the staff, then there's a member there to help. some of these bigger communities like Burnaby and that, they have those offices 24/7 where we don't have that capability. If it's there, it'll be used and it'll be very helpful. We can keep the folks downtown. Part of the problem is if we have to process an individual, like if you have to fingerprint or if we have to take photographs and stuff, we have to bring them back to the office here to kind of process them. If they have what we call an endorsed warrant, that's basically we have to process them. They get released right away. We have to come back here and do that because that involves doing some fingerprints and some photographs. So that process we can't do there. But the investigative stuff where we can maybe do interviews and talk to people, that would be perfect location for that.
Great. Thank you for the insight, gentlemen, and appreciate all you do.
All right, and Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks very much, Inspector Curvers. We had some technical problems at the start of the meeting there. I'm not sure if you let us know Officer Beauregard's rank.
Oh, that's my apology. It's Staff Sergeant Troy Beauregard. He's our operations NCO. So he's responsible for all the watches in the office.
Thanks very much, Staff Sergeant. Good to see you as well. Appreciate the work that you and your officers are doing in our community. I wanted to get a sense from you what your feelings are about the level of reporting that citizens are doing these days. Sometimes we get the message from people that they had a theft, but they didn't bother reporting it. Because they were concerned that they'd have to wait on the line for a long time. I'm just wondering if you have any information about call response these days and any information you're getting about the level of reporting that is actually taking place.
Calls are about the same. We're trending down a little bit. For specifics on like thefts and types of offenses, I don't have the statistics for that. And again, it's incumbent for people to report to us what's going on, no matter how minimal they might think it is, because if we can correlate a whole bunch of information and tabulate that, we can use that down the road. If we're looking at an individual or something, we need a piece of the puzzle that might be in that information that they send to us in a report. There's still the online reporting system in place. If people want to feel like they want to not talk to us, there's still the online reporting. They can report the whole the incident online, and I think it's on the city's webpage as well, where they can do that, where I think there's a link. And then if there is substance to those files, because those are reviewed by a few individuals, they'll follow up with those files, and we'll assign follow-up to kind of follow up with that individual.
Thanks. That's good to know. My other question was, as you know, we've had some disruptions with some of the services that we've been providing for street outreach and such in the downtown area. And we've also had support activities located in different parts of the community. Do you see any correlation between those services, or when they cease to be provided, or where they're located, and incidents that are reported to you in particular neighborhoods?
I'm sorry, you're referring to Connect?
Well, Connect, and we also had a warming center operating out of the Salvation Army in Fitzgerald for a period of time. What brings a question to mind is several of us met with a group of citizens from the Fitzgerald Avenue, 17th Street area recently, and they were reporting incidents that may have been related to provision of some services in that area. We're not sure about that. I'm just curious.
There was a bit of a spike when Connect shut down. Because they went to the Salvation Army, and that area and the surrounding neighborhood was affected. We were trying to respond to that as best we could with our bike unit and the frontline policing. So I would say, yes, there is a bit of a correlation with the Connect shutting and people finding other locations to find shelter. So when that opens again, that'll be a kind of a benefit because it kind of houses them in one spot.
Good to know. And finally, I'm just wondering what sort of calls you're getting from the neighborhoods adjacent to the railway tracks. We've had some concerns expressed to us in those neighborhoods in recent weeks with activity that relates to people who don't appear to have a place to live, or drug dealing that's going on in and around there.
We're talking the tracks by the junction?
Well, I wasn't going to mention the name, but yes, we are. Between the Apple Tree Grocery and the railway station, that area there, it's been a heavy corridor for foot traffic and challenges for many years.
Yeah, we are constantly going to those areas, trying to deal with any kind of scenario that pops up. And again, it's if the community needs to call us, and then we can respond to those kind of scenarios.
Great. I know every chance we get, we encourage people to get in touch, no matter whether they think there'll be an immediate response or not, and to be patient and make sure to get through. And the online reporting tool works really well. Thanks very much.
So thanks, Councillor Hillian, for that. Any further questions from council? I don't see any further ones. Thanks very much. I have maybe one question, just, looking, back over the last 3.5 years, one of the things that the city's worked hard on is updating our bylaw for nuisance homes, and it seems like we've had some success, and I just wondered where that's at, if it's still helpful, or if there's any tweaks that are required.
Yeah, so having a robust set of bylaws is just another tool for us to use, when it comes to both prevention and enforcement. So I certainly encourage, as always, as things arise, modernization and update of those bylaws. Again, it's just a benefit for us, or another tool to use to combat any issues that arise, right? It's just something else we can take a look at. And we've been working, I know, closely with some of the bylaw folks in that regard. I look forward to more of that in the future.
Awesome. That's great. Really appreciate it. And I think, the modernization that's happened so far has been done in conjunction with the RCMP. So like I said, I know there's been some successes there. So excellent. Well, with that, I don't see any further questions. So thanks very much for your presentation today. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having us.
All right. And I should probably take a vote on that, hey? Or was that?
I didn't get but I first and seconded, but
Sure, I'll just take a vote. All those in favor of his presentation, any opposed? That passes unanimously, so we'll let him go. And moving on into council remuneration. I don't know, maybe just pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In front of you is our council remuneration review. In accordance with Bylaw 2941, a market remuneration for elected officials was completed starting in January of this year, as it's an election year. I just wanted to acknowledge Ms. Linda Roach, who's our manager of HR. She led this review with the support of our compensation consultant, Julie Case. As outlined in the staff report, Ms. Case has assisted the city on the last 2 occasions with respect to this review. We have 3 recommendations for council. We addressed the mayor's remuneration, which is market-based in accordance with our policy to the median. We addressed council's remuneration, and the staff report provides a short overview of some of the analysis that was done, and Ms. Roach led that analysis. I really appreciated her work. Through the changes in the 17-18 years, council's remuneration relative to the mayor's has got out of alignment. Typically, we've had an alignment in the area of 40% of the salary of the mayor. So our recommendation at a staff level is to adjust council's remuneration to reflect the previous distribution between the mayor's rate. And then our third remuneration recommendation is to update the policies. It's been a very long time since we've looked at that. There's been a lot of trends in local government elected officials' remuneration, and in alignment with our organization's core values and our strategic plan, we are a team, and looking and addressing remuneration for elected officials and benefits needs to be reviewed and updated. As well, there are certainly some trends within the province for municipalities of our size that should be addressed. And that remuneration review policy process would happen with council following the next municipal election. Our recommendation is on page 12 of the agenda, and I'm available for questions.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jeff. Really appreciate that. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. This is always a difficult issue to resolve. And in part, councils try to resolve it by not voting on their own current remuneration, but setting the stage for the following term. So that if in fact there are increases, the electorate has the ability to pronounce on that through the election process. It's still fraught with challenge, and one of the challenges that I see in the recommendations before us is that we're looking at, in spite of the fact that there's a market comparative study been done, we're looking at significant percentage increases. And this comes at a time when inflation is creating all sorts of pressure in relation to wages. We just hear of an increase in, or of a settlement rather, with the library workers, and it looks to me like it's a 3% increase that they're looking at. I know that there are currently negotiations going on in relation to regional district employees at the sports center. So my concern is what sort of message does it send to the staff that we bargain with and others in the municipal sector if we bring about increases that are percentages that are significantly larger than what's being achieved at the bargaining table. That's my problem with the proposals that are before us tonight, and I'd be really interested to hear what other councillors think of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And next we have Councillor Theos.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, absolutely. I very much agree with those sentiments, and also not just the staff, but the public at a greater level that are just trying to get back on their feet from a few years of COVID, and still a lot of uncertainty out there, and a lot of challenges still ahead that we are going to be encountering. But when I look at the graph of other communities, I don't see us being out of line. I see we're very similar to larger communities as in terms of what council and mayor makes in Campbell River and Langford, Penticton, Oak Bay. It's very, very similar to those communities on the island, and I think a modest increase could be something that could be considered, but I just don't see us in need of a significant increase. Over the years, the concept of what we do is on a community level has a lot to similarities to volunteering within our community, and I think people tend to look at it that way. And of course, the fact that there's a remuneration to covers expenses from days we may lose at our other jobs or whatnot is beneficial, but. I don't think that we're out of line with what we have, so I'm not supportive of these kind of increases.
Thanks, Councillor Theos. And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor. And I certainly appreciate the comments that have been made so far. I think they're valid points as well, but I don't necessarily share the conclusion of them. I mean, one of the issues that we have in front of us is that there has been no increase to council remuneration for 8 years. So in order to get in line with what the average is, we're looking at bigger increases than we would have had the last time this dialogue took place. The decision was made to stay in line with what the average is. The other point I'd like to make is that I would say, from speaking with my fellow council members, that the average time that each of us are putting into this work is easily 20 hours a week. And with some council members, I would say it's probably closer to 30. And so asking people to provide that kind of dedication and response to community and availability for meetings, it takes them away from their job. And if we don't believe in compensating people for that work, then what we're deciding is that the only people that we believe should represent our community at the council table are those that are wealthy enough that they don't need to worry about their productive hours during the week, or that they've had their time in their career and they're at a point where they're retired or have some type of compensation or pension, I should say. Our community is fairly fortunate that we actually have quite a few young retirees, thanks to a lot of service members at the Air Force deciding to stay here. So that is a possible approach. And I think perhaps it's served up until now, but I think if we would like to see a wide representation of ages and backgrounds at this table, we do need to expect to compensate people for the time that they spend here. And just to pick up on the point of our increases that we've seen negotiated with our union contracts of 2% and 3%, I would point out that if we were to do a calculation of what 20 or 25 hours a week looks like, we're receiving a much lower hourly rate than any of the contracts that that we have agreed to with our unionized staff over our terms. So I'm happy with the suggestion in the report of bringing our compensation in line with what other municipalities are doing. I do have one question for staff about the report. And that is how the comparative municipalities were chosen, because I would assume it would be the closest in population, but it does seem as though we don't have some communities that are closer in population to us than others that are provided in the list. So if I could just get some information on that.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum. I'll pass it over to CAO Jeff Garbutt.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor McCollum. This list is an amalgam of lists that were previously used, and we added some more closer comparison communities based on population. But if you were, and also I would say, this does rely on the good graces of other municipalities to respond back through our consultants. So if there were other communities that you're interested, you could let me know.
Yeah, I guess just I looked at, it just seemed that having Oak Bay and Esquimalt that are almost half of our population, when there's, 4 or 5 other municipalities that are much closer to Courtney. I was just curious on how we landed on the list.
And I think the list is a bit historical, like it's just a list that's been used for some time, but it was a concern that I brought up with staff as well. And that's why the recommended motion has an end that, so that basically they can start over and actually create potentially a better way of doing those comparisons. But I don't want to speak for staff, but Mr. Garbutt, if you wanted to.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, that I appreciate the clarification. That's our third recommendation, because we are dealing with a dated approach, and as council is also likely aware, those are the old population figures. This study started before the new information was provided, so there has been some distribution of population, but Courtney does find itself in a somewhat unique position with our size. There's many that are just quite a bit larger and quite a bit smaller, so I really would appreciate that direction from council to develop a new approach, and that would allow consensus on the comparators and help us build for the future, as well as look at an opportunity to not have review the remuneration only once every 4 years, which does result in very large increases, or perception of those increases, particularly if you look year over year, with many municipalities now do an annual increase.
Thanks for those comments.
Yeah, and that's a great comment in terms of the, sort of saving it all up for a one lump sum right before, the year before an election, kind of to decide it, and then having that take effect after the election certainly brings along with that perception. Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Please indulge me. I did prepare some comments. It will be probably about twice as long as our recommended time, but I'm prepared them so that I can stay on track. So I'm pleased to see this report come forward. This is always a difficult topic to discuss, even though we're looking at remuneration for the next council and beyond and not the current council. My comments today may be unpopular to some. The reason I'm making them is because there are voices not heard in decision-making spaces, in part due to the way we've always done things, which includes how we remunerate people in local government. When I ran for council, I promised I would do my best to elevate these voices and to promote equity and diversity whenever possible. There's an expectation by some that council work should not be considered a real job and more like community service or volunteering. Taxpayers don't want the burden of high council pay, and I understand that. But we are not volunteers. We're expected to do the necessary work. We're not volunteers who can say, oh, sorry, I'm not available to help today. I'm not available to take your phone call, to return an email, and many other things. It's a fact that with all of our progress, the face of leadership is pretty homogenous. We don't see many people of color, young folks, LGBTQ people, renters, or people with lower incomes around the table. That's a fact. Across Canada, we're even far from achieving gender balance, with women making up only 18% of mayor's positions and 28% of councillors' positions. So if we truly want to fairly and equitably represent all citizens, we must change this, in my opinion. One way of attracting more diverse candidates to run for council is to provide better remuneration and other accommodations to elected officials, such as reimbursement for childcare during meetings. What a difference it could make for a younger single parent with an inflexible work schedule and lower pay to know that they would be adequately compensated for their vital contributions. What a benefit to citizens to know there is a variety of lived experiences around the table, reflecting their views, values, and needs. Until you're in the position, you don't really know what the workload will be. Many presume that what they see publicly 2 or 3 meetings a month are the hours we put in. However, if you want to do a good job and be accountable to the public, you need to put in the hours to properly prepare for 150 to 300 plus page agendas, often with complex reports, to manage hundreds of emails and phone calls, to meet with citizens, and to do the same for in-camera meetings. Then there are strategic planning sessions, budget meetings, sessions on a myriad of topics such as transportation, infrastructure projects, reconciliation work, and governance. There are the external appointments such as the Library Board, Downtown Courtney Business Improvement Association, Community Justice Society, and Social Planning Council, to name a few, that all entail meetings, preparation, and sometimes subcommittee work. It's true that some council members choose to put in more hours than others with external committees that benefit the community, but currently every council member has external appointments. Some think that we should not compare our pay to other communities of the same size, yet business, healthcare, military, and other sectors do this. Why should local government be different? Comox has about 58% of Courtney's population and recently passed a remuneration bylaw that increases councillors' pay to more than Courtney's current pay. Even with our proposed increase, Comox councillors' pay would be 80% of our proposed pay. And I'm not picking on Comox. My understanding is that they had a fairly agonizing discussion and their previous remuneration was lower than similarly sized communities. I will argue that the expectations on Courtney Council are much higher relative to our size and population. We are frequently pressured to resolve issues outside of our mandate, to solve homelessness, to create truly affordable housing, and to solve transportation issues for the entire region. As the urban center of the Comox Valley with the majority of services, we are called on to manage the unhoused and often very unwell folks in our downtown, and to deal with multiple encampments that create problems for those in them, for neighbors, and for the environment. During COVID and climate events such as the heat domes and extreme cold, it is our city that was scrambling to assist the majority of our most vulnerable citizens. Of course, it's our amazing staff along with community agencies and volunteers that do the heavy lifting, but council provides the leadership, decision-making, direction, and often approves the financial resources to support what needs to be done. To those who think we worked less during COVID and accomplished little, I challenge you on that. I conservatively estimated this week. I tallied up my hours, and I've put in an average of 25 to 30 hours a week during COVID, which amounts to, I think, around $15 an hour, maybe give or take. And contrary to popular belief, we do not receive extended benefits, pensions, or other perks. And yes, we knew what the remuneration was before we decided to run. I speak for myself when I say that even knowing now what the job entails, the pay won't prevent me from running again. I'm just as passionate about serving the community now as when I started. But I hope we can look to the future to broaden representation at the council table over time. And I see this as one step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Mourning and Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Mourning, for that remarkably considered statement. I have many of the same points, and will probably make them briefly, as I think Councillor Mourning covered them quite eloquently. This work, if it's done well, takes a lot of time, and we've talked about that. Various people have talked about sort of 20 to 30 hours a week that it can take to get the job done well. One of the things that I think is also worth considering is those hours are often random. They change from week to week, and they're usually during the 9 to 5 work week. So while I think some of us who are self-employed or who are working at a senior level where our hours are flexible are able to somehow squeeze these things into our weeks by working weekends and evenings. But if you're a shift worker, if you're being paid by the hour, if your employer is not interested in the fact that there is a meeting with the Minister of Housing that's just been scheduled, then you will not be able to sit at this table and do the work as it should be done. And I do take what Councillor Hillian said to heart. And I've said, to be honest, that was my initial impression. I think I may even have vocalized that in this room regarding pay increases relative to others. And it's taken some conversations, and particularly some persuasive conversations with my colleague, Councillor Mourning, to just really help me see clearly the equity considerations that are here. We do risk having a council that is limited in its views, limited in its economic background, if we aren't willing to pay people well, and well may be a bit of an overstatement, as I do think that probably this pay works out to somewhere just around or above minimum wage, depending on how one is doing the job and how much time one devotes to it. And I just, give us an example. In the last 7 days, there was obviously this council meeting. We met with our MLA, we met with Minister Eby, the Minister of Housing. Many of us met with the Comox Youth Climate Council on Friday. I know I had a meeting with our CAO, Mr. Garbett, and I was at a meeting this morning for the substance use, community substance use strategy. There were 2 other meetings that I wasn't able to get to, 2 other events because of scheduling conflicts, and yet another one which was canceled because the host had COVID. So I think it's often seen that perhaps we only show up for an hour or 2 of meetings a month, and I'm just trying to say that just picking a random week out of the calendar the last 7 days, that's what my week looked like in terms of obligations from council. And that doesn't include responding to emails, talking to colleagues, and conversations. I don't know if you ever get elected to public office, you'll find grocery shopping takes about 3 times as long as it did. And those are all great moments. But it's something that's fairly constant. Just as a last reference, I do recall, like, the year after I was elected, I was catching a flight to see my parents in Ontario. You have to fly quite early in the morning to do that. I arrived at the airport at around 5:30, and a bright face came up to me and said, "Hey, Will, do you have time to talk a bit of politics? I've got a question." And having not had coffee, and because it was before 5:30, I handed them a card and asked if they could perhaps give me a call back at another time. But the work of council is if done well, involves being open to the community at all day hours of the day, as I've learned to find out. So while my initial reaction was to think about limited pay increases, when I put this into perspective, the fact that we haven't had a pay increase for 8 years, that 8 years at roughly 3% compounded is very close to the amount that's actually suggested. So it's stuck there for 8 years, and therefore the jump when it finally is changed is going to be considerable. In the long run, I'd like to see us find a way of making this an arm's length decision. We've done what we can. We're not voting for our own pay. It's for future councillors. Maybe it'll be us, maybe it won't. That's all we can do in terms of distancing ourselves from this decision. But I welcome the review that staff are going to do over the next year following the election to find a way to come up with fair amounts that don't require us intervening in the salaries of our future colleagues. But for all of those reasons, and fundamentally because of the equity reasons that Councillor Mourning has brought up, I will be supporting an increase. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cole-Hamilton. And Councillor Frisch. Yeah, I just got to make sure I got the right number here. I got a little list. My apologies. Oh, and I pushed the wrong button having said that. Okay, you're on.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, certainly the workload is not insignificant. And I was here the last time we voted for council remuneration, and I decided at the time that the next council didn't need a raise. But the last 4 years have been especially busy. It's probably always been busy, but it's felt busier for me as a councillor. And I would also point out that the provincial government actually got rid of a non-taxable amount. There was a third non-taxable amount when I first was on council, and it actually makes quite a difference if your income, is above $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000. So that was taken away, and we did increase the amount a little bit, but it actually doesn't compensate it in equal amounts because it's a complicated tax system. But in the long run, I think it would be wise to offer a remuneration number that allows, like it's been argued, more people to be at this table and not take away from their regular work. It is a significant a drain on your resources for your job, for your family, for everything else that you might want to do in life, and it's very worthwhile. But we'll definitely be cutting people out if we don't give a reasonable amount. So with that, I'll just happily move option 1, and that is that the bylaw 2941 be amended to adjust the mayor's remuneration to $83,000 and council's remuneration to $33,200, and that following the 22 municipal election, a review of the City of Courtenay Council remuneration process and policy be undertaken, and recommendation for an updated review procedure be considered.
All right, it's been moved in second. Thank you for that. And thanks, Councillor Frisch, and being patient with me as I figured out which number you were. Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to all my colleagues for your thoughtful remarks, which certainly give me pause for a lot of thought and consideration. I do have a question for staff with regards to the procedure that would be undertaken for an updated review process. I'm just wondering if you can give us any indication of what the options are in that regard. My understanding is that COMOX is looking at potentially referring this to an arm's length committee of some sort. I'm not sure if that's part of the consideration, but what are the possibilities for how this could be done in a different way that doesn't put people in the position of appearing to essentially feather their own nest in the eyes of some in the community?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian and all of council. This is a very challenging conversation, and the system that we have right now makes it challenging. Because it hasn't been reviewed, the approach hasn't been reviewed in a very long time. We've missed out on some of the changes that have happened. So across the province, some of the things that vary in this remuneration review include approaching an exterior committee of representative members of the community, using comparators that come not only in local governments, looking at annual changes tied to fixed rates like CPI, et cetera. So it doesn't even come before councils, it's just built in or baked in. We would put together some options for the next council to look at, and they would provide direction back on how to do that. I think that often in communities our size, there is an exterior focus potentially for that review to take it entirely out of the hands of elected officials. However, you do need to develop that policy, you need to approve it, so the people that are benefiting from that policy will be part of it. I would say that the structure we have right now does not have you voting specifically on your current wage. Should you wish to run again, and should you be the choice of the public, then you would benefit from that. So I only offer that for consideration. But when we do this as local government, there's options all over the place in terms of how to do it. I think there's a much better way to do it, and I think it would address some of the concerns and questions that either you're asked as elected officials or you struggle with as elected officials in that balance of representation, fair remuneration for the time. It's a very serious matter. As a person who's worked in local government the majority of my adult life, you know, the amount of work that elected officials put in, it's a job, it's not a pastime. And so I would provide that counsel, you know, consider those items. And I think on our own staff, Ms. O'Connell, Ms. Roach, Ms. Proton have all been through processes, and we'll have some advice. And we'll also look to consultant market that do this across the province for advice on how best to do it. And then there'll be a public discussion about that.
Thanks for that. I'm wondering also if staff have any information about processes whereby a council could potentially set up an equity fund, so that, for example, in Councillor Mournings's excellent example of the provision of childcare, if there would be a process whereby that could be provided if it in fact was a need. I think it's something that is well worth looking at to potentially remove that as a barrier for people who might be able to serve in this capacity if that was available. There's no way that we can make the salaries here the equivalent of working in competitive jobs in the community, such that somebody could feed their family with the salary of a city councillor. But if there are ways that we can augment these stipends to address some of those equity issues, I would be all in favor of exploring that. So I'm just wondering if staff know of any examples where that's been tried.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian, the benefits and eligible expenses available to councillors vary across British Columbia. Our council, or the consultant that assisted us with this review, had only identified one location that had formally made those changes. Again, only through our comparator communities. As you all know, you sit around the tables at UBCM, AVICC, even for FCM for that matter. This discussion on what can support participation at elected officials is evolving. But I've am aware that the eligible expenses to support people, including childcare or elder care, some people call it minding expenses, are being considered for eligibility in other municipalities. That would form the basis. Currently, our bylaw reflects only remuneration. It doesn't look at process. It doesn't look at eligible expenses. Mr. Langemeyer has just joined us from Powell River, provided me with an example of what is included in the total package when they look for their council. And so again, anytime you haven't looked at a policy for an extended period, you're out of line, and we'll look to address both common and emerging issues that will support our council priorities.
All right, thanks for that. And Councillor McCall.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one last comment in support of the motion. I really appreciate all of the points that Councillor Mourning raised with regards to equity and inclusion and ensuring that we're not designing a compensation system that selects for people who are financially established. And it reminded me that while many of us attended the Earth Day event, one of the questions that was asked of us by the youth was what would you do to encourage youth to participate in the political system? And I would argue that not providing a realistic compensation amount for a commitment that lasts for 4 years, that's somewhere between 15 and 30 hours a week, is a way of excluding the young people coming up that may have an interest in serving at this table. I'm one of the youngest people here, and I would imagine that I was probably the last generation in BC to benefit from affordable housing prices in getting into the real estate market. And while it certainly didn't feel affordable to me at the time, reflecting back, it's an order of magnitude different for youth nowadays. It's unlikely that a young person under the age of 30 would even own a home. And to expect people to dedicate dozens of hours a week without at least getting some recognition of the time that's spent, we will most certainly not see those people participate in our local government system. So I just wanted to make that final comment.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum. And Councillor Mourning.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just a couple notes. I appreciate all the comments. I like Councillor Hillian's idea around equity. I really would like to see even the childcare issue, though, looked at, because we do have an election coming, and it may make the difference to people deciding to run. We know that the first few months of the term are really heavy with orientation, with conferences, all that kind of stuff. I have spoken to folks across the province who have implemented childcare. It really amounts to very little money, but it makes a huge difference for the people that utilize it. As an example, maybe $40 a day for, a UBCM conference or ABICC or something, so that a parent can participate, or some babysitter money when these meetings, although they're not as long as they used to be, go long to help in that regard. It really doesn't amount to a lot of money, but it does give the opportunity for better participation. And as I said, it may increase some diversity at the table if we were to look at that. And I don't know if we could make that amendment here or add that as a subsequent, I'm not sure. But I do think that piece is important. And I am a bit concerned about not looking at incremental increases until the next term, because I just don't want to see us get back into this position of having this kind of conversation again. So that's all I'll say on that. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Councillor Mourning. And Councillor Theos.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I know when I look around this table, I don't see a shortage of caring and passion and the ability to connect with people through all my colleagues here at this table. And I think that's to me, what I think really makes a difference for the general public, and for giving people the desire to want to run. I don't believe that you can offer twice the amount of pay and get different candidates, running for the right reasons. I think that people that want to run because of those elements I stated will run, and regardless of the pay. I look at our fire department, how we are grateful for our volunteer fire staff that are putting in many hours and are just as qualified as what we'd call professional firefighting staffs in many other cities. But the fact that they're doing it for the literally very low compensation that they're getting with the abilities that they have, I think that's what makes a difference to the general public, and that's what motivated me in the first place. And I never thought for one second as a lower income earner, boy, being shortchanged, being on council. I just thought what a privilege it is to be part of the council, and on a daily basis, nightly basis, when I hear people coming into my place of work and telling me how grateful they are for the connection that I've made with them in the past, that to me is the reward that's needed. And I don't see the compensation as being a motivation, to many good quality people that have run in the past and been part of councils and that would run in the future.
Thanks, Councillor Theos, for that. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm really stuck on this one, and I'm stuck because I agree with the very well thought out and reasoned approach taken by Councillor Mourning in particular, as well as other colleagues. But I'm also challenged by the fact that many people in our community are struggling and looking at tax increases. And the optics of this are problematic in that regard. Mind you, they'll probably always be as such. But I'm just wondering from staff's perspective, if there is, we're being presented with essentially a take it or leave it position here. There is an option that says, we give staff some sort of different direction. And I'm wondering from staff's perspective, if some of the issues that have been discussed tonight could be considered in relation to things like a childcare allowance or something to address particular needs that people might have that would facilitate them serving at a table like this. Whether something like that could in fact be presented that would give us another option between the leaving things as they are and taking this package, which while it provides a bump up, I think it's 14% in the case of the mayor's remuneration. I'm not sure what the percentage is for the councillors. Maybe it's higher than that. But I'm wondering if there's any possibility that something could be brought to us that would give us another alternative somewhere in between that with a selection of possibilities, including an equity option.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and I'll pass it over to Jeff Garvey.
Thank you, through the mayor, to council generally. So on page 15 of the staff report, we have two specific options. Option one recommends mayor's remuneration at 83,000 and councillor's remuneration at 33,200, and that reflects the adjustment of the spread between the mayor and councillors that was exacerbated in the 17-18 process. Option two, which is the market median in strictly for the mayor's remuneration at 83,000 and councillor's remuneration at 30,500. So there are two options presented to council. The examination that we did at a staff level reflected council's discussion, our strategic plan, the core values that we have as an organization, recognizing council as part of our corporate team as the city. It reflects best practice and it reflects input from our compensation consultant. Option 3 provides no adjustment, and then option 4 is alternate direction. I would advise as your senior staffer that not having an adjustment would be inappropriate. And the recommendation in front of you reflects our organization's history. It reflects the market and comparable local governments. And I think at this point, we're at council's discretion in this regard.
Well, thanks for that. So while I would prefer that we looked at option 4 and explored other possibilities, I need to make a decision based on the motion that's on the floor just now. And with many misgivings, I will support the resolution because I am swayed by the arguments presented by Councillor Mourning in terms of the concerns for equity and the message to people who might not be able to serve if we maintained these types of levels. I realize that we will be subject to significant criticism on this basis. I hope that people will look at it on balance and consider that one way or the other when they make the decision about who to place on the next council, that it will in fact be money well spent. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian and Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Hopefully this is my last comment. Yeah, I appreciate hearing Councillor Hillian's comments. The other options to me are not in favor of I think we do respectfully, Mayor, want to narrow the gap a little bit in the remuneration between council and mayor. Cumberland councillors receive 60% of the mayor's remuneration, and Comox 57%. I know those communities are a lot smaller, and they're looking at comparables with communities of their size, but I think going lower than the 40% is not as palatable to me. And again, that's recognizing that the mayor does have many other responsibilities and all of that. And I guess, it brings me to Cumberland and Comox both had this very difficult discussion as well. And their increases were actually far more than ours. And they were looking at comparable communities as well, which is exactly what we're doing. We're not proposing something that's beyond the median. We're actually just getting, if we want to look at equity, we're looking at, getting to the level playing field here. And if we had increases along the line, as Councillor McCollum, stated, if we'd done a 2 or 3% for the last 8 years, probably people wouldn't really be that concerned about it because it would be very similar to other folks. And we are not getting the kind of, we're not getting a salary that is astronomical here, or, we are reflecting that this is not a type of position that you get a regular salary. I think we're just, trying to sort of stay in the ballpark and to make it fair for people who may not have the means to enter politics and who really are needed. Their voices at the table are needed. So I'm in favor of the motion as proposed. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Morin. And just a point of clarity, that the increase would be a single increase for the entire term, or if there's a CPI increase yearly.
Through the mayor to council, the proposal is based on our current policy. So it would be that salary for the entirety of the term, subject to the review of next council. They could change that.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. And I want to appreciate everybody's comments today. It's a very, very difficult conversation to, first of all, have to vote on our own perceived increases, even though it is the next council. And I think that's a good distinction. And I'm just going to comment on a couple of points. I think everybody covered the points really well. And one of the points was how it can affect your ability to work and be at your own job, but also how it impacts your family and how it impacts your recreation in your spare time. And I think there's been a lot of good examples of that. And the conferences that we go to, the unexpected meetings have been, especially during COVID, have been exacerbated to a level that certainly is significantly more than in the previous term. And in fact, as the owner of a business, it wasn't sustainable for myself to actually be able to run that and give that the same attention that I was able to prior to becoming mayor and prior to COVID. And those types of things are really the ones that impact us. Again, if you're volunteering, it's very seldom that people criticize you. And I would say that as an elected official, it does put you in the crosshairs. This is probably one of those conversations and decisions, but there's many things that really cause people to come out. And again, trying to eliminate barriers is I think, a good thing. And I think with that, we'll call the question. So all those in favor? Any opposed? And Councillor Theos is opposed. All right. Thanks everybody for that conversation, and thanks to staff. And obviously looking forward, I think the entire council for revamping as best we can how we figure out these remuneration questions going forward. With that, we can move into the audited financial statements. Councillor, hang on. Yeah, it is Councillor Frisch. Yeah.
I'll move that council approves the audited financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2021.
Excellent. And I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you. Through the mayor, Mr. Langemar is going to pass that through to his staff. I think you were going to do an introduction.
Thank you through the CEO to mayor and council. Corey Vanderhorst from M&P, the accounting firm who does the annual financial statements audit for the city, is here. Corey will present the audit findings and the 2021 consolidated financial statements. Before I turn it over to Corey, I would like to acknowledge all of the finance staff that has worked really hard in preparing these financial statements. And in particular, I would like to acknowledge Krista McClintock, our accountant, as well as Robin Tate, our accounting technician, who helped me with drafting the financials. And with that said, I will turn it over to Corey. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. Hello, everyone. I think he is going to load up the presentation. Thank you for having me here to talk to you today. I will talk to you about the financial statements, a little bit about the audit process, and then I'm happy to take some questions at the end. Just give it a second. There we are. So I think if you move ahead one or two slides. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So starting off by looking at the financial statements for 2021, a reminder that we're looking at them on a consolidated basis. So the general revenue, water, sewer, capital fund, the reserves, and gaming. Throughout the year, when you get reports from staff, you might get things broken up into those different funds, but we're looking at everything all together here today to look at the entire year. Next slide, please. So we start with the statement of financial position for the balance sheet, a snapshot of what's in the accounts on December 31st of 2021. So again, we're get you to think back about 4 months to the end of the year. The city has a cash and investment balance of $73.9 million. So I'll get into in a future slide where some of that money is earmarked for projects and various reserves. If you add in the accounts receivable and some other small financial assets, you get a total financial asset number of $78.1 million. There's currently debt being carried by the city of $13.4 million. There's an increase of debt of just over $3 million for the year for some capital projects. And when you add the debt and the accounts payable and other liabilities and deferred revenues, and you get a total liability number of $46.8 million. So if you take that total liability number and subtract it off the total financial assets, you get what we call the net financial asset position, or $31.3 million. You can see the increase from the prior year's 26.5. The next line is the tangible capital assets, the physical assets, things you can touch and see, buildings and vehicles and equipment, as well as infrastructure, water and sewer, roads, and some of the other network infrastructure that the city is maintaining. So the current book value of those assets are $174 million. You can see a pretty good increase from 2020 with some of the larger capital projects that were going on throughout 2021. And the last number on the slide here is the accumulated surplus. It's $206 million at the end of 2021. I'll get into what's in that number in a future slide. Next slide, please. Moving then to the income statement or the statement of operations and looking at the activities at the city for the year. So total revenues of $68 million, an increase over the prior year and actually over budget. Some of the increases coming from some additional gas tax grants for capital projects, some donated capital assets that came in throughout the year. Then on the expenses side, total expenses of $52.3 million, an increase from the prior year, which is what we would expect to see, with remembering that 2020 had some of the pandemic activity, so reduced recreation activity and costs in 2020, which would have come back in 2021, but still under budget, where the budget was 55.8 and the actual expenses of 52.3. So on an accounting basis, the city is an accounting annual surplus of just shy of $16 million for 2021. Next slide, please. So I say an accounting basis because we do all sorts of things to adjust deferred revenues and receivables and payables. I like to look then at the cash flow statement to give you a better sense of what's happened in the main bank accounts. This is more in line with how you're thinking when you're doing your budget process that you would have just gone through. So cash flows from operations of the city are $18.7 million for 2021. You can see capital spending of $10.1 million. There's a small amount net transferred into investments to earn a better rate of return. And then provided by financing, net of the repayments, was $2.4 million. So the net cash inflow in the main bank accounts for the year was $10.8 million. Next slide, please. Thank you. I promised I'd get into what's in the accumulated surplus number, the $206 million. You can see that the largest value by far is what we call the invested in the tangible capital assets. So that's the book value of the physical assets minus the debt that the city is carrying. That is not a cash number. That is hard things, stuff you can touch, not cash in the bank. There's $21.3 million set aside in reserves. There's an additional 1.3 in the capital fund set aside for capital projects. Gaming fund has $1.8 million, a small increase year over year, and the operating fund is just shy of $21 million at the end of 2021. So shifting gears then and getting out of the financial statements. There into some of our audit results. For a clean audit opinion, we are satisfied that the financial statements that your staff have put together for you are prepared and all.
Hi, Corey, your audio is breaking in and out.
The appropriate. I need to sign the report. I've got all my final assets. Sorry, I'm losing my internet connection. It sounds like.
Yeah, I don't know if you're able to plug in or, but yeah, we're probably getting about maybe 60%, 50% somewhere in there right now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to see if I can put my headphones in and see if that has any. It's not going to impact the internet connection, but it will. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay, standing by, and your video is turned off, so we've got it on as minimal amount of bandwidth is required right now.
Yeah, that's let me turn my video off if that's okay as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so apologies for that.
No problem. So on this slide, if you want to just start over, because we missed the first chunk for sure, and which made the rest of it less useful.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Starting over on this slide, we are happy to be able to provide another clean audit opinion, or what we call an unqualified audit opinion. We are satisfied that the financial statements prepared by your staff are not materially misstated and prepared in accordance with the appropriate accounting standards for local government. We are ready to sign the audit report after council approving the statements here today. I've got all the final bits of information I needed, checking with lawyers and things like that. I am going to just plug in.
Your audio has gotten way better, I think, maybe with just by turning your video off. So,
hey, how about now?
Oh, we got how about, but I think the now was cut off.
I think taking the video feed out has resolved that. I'm going to keep going, but please feel free to interrupt me as I, if I'm cutting out again.
Fair enough. And it's significantly better. Yeah.
Okay.
Continue.
Great. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so our audit process, and you have our audit findings report in your council packages, but a quick highlights of that document. In our audit, we look at controls in place at the city to ensure that you're getting accurate reporting. We sample transactions throughout the year to be able to form our audit opinion. We do not look at every transaction that happens throughout the year. That's just not something that we'd be able to do in a cost-effective manner. I do want to formally acknowledge the excellent cooperation from staff. Thank you to Renata and her team. Thank you to Jeff and the rest of the staff at the city. We're bugging lots of different departments as we go through the audit to make sure that we're satisfied that the financials are accurate, and the audit does go very smoothly. A big thank you to the staff. Next slide, please. Also confirm that MMP is independent with respect to the city. I am aware of one other project that our advisory and consulting folks have been doing with, I believe, your engineering department, but I do not have anything to do with that project. We maintain separate teams, and that project also does not have a direct bearing on your financial statements. So it does allow us to maintain our independence when we do the audit. I think the last few slides are going to talk a little bit more about some numbers. So stepping out of, I started with looking at 2021 and just that 1 year of results. So I like to end by looking at a little bit of financial analysis, and we look over a 5-year period, over the last 5 years, to look at trends in your financial results. So the two main ratios that we look at, the first one is we look at a sustainability ratio of financial assets to liabilities. Here we're looking for this number to be greater than 1, which means that you have financial resources available to finance the future, to pay for future projects. If this number dips below 1, it means you are taxing or raising user fees or other sources of funds in the future to pay for the past. And you're a little behind. You've got some catch up to do. So the good news for the city is that this ratio has been steadily increasing for the last 5 years. It is greater than 1. It's currently 1.67, small increase from 1.66 in the prior year. And it's the trend for the last 5 years, from 2017 to 2021, is a positive upward trend. You can see it was 1.47 5 years ago, and now up to 1.67. Next slide, please. The last ratio we look at is and we call this flexibility because we're looking at the infrastructure and the physical assets that you're managing. And why do we call it flexibility? Because if your assets are getting older, you lose that flexibility with what you're doing with your cash flows and your revenues, because you're constantly doing repairs and maintenance and fixing up infrastructure. So it's a huge issue. So we look at the carrying value, or what we call the depreciated value of your physical assets, the capital assets, and then we compare that to the original cost, and it gives us a rough aging of the assets. This is not a full asset management plan. This doesn't look at condition assessments of those assets. It doesn't look at timelines to replacement or any sort of engineering numbers, just what's in the finances. And here you can see for the city that for 2021, that value is 61.6%. Fairly consistent with the past 5 years. It's been ranging from about 61.3 to 61.6. So when you look at it over a 5-year period, and we know there's been some significant capital projects, especially in the infrastructure at the city, this means you're holding the line on that infrastructure, on the spending, and on being able to ensure that your assets are providing services to the residents. And I think that's the last slide. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I would be happy to answer any questions from council.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Corey. Once you got the audio sorted out there, it's been great ever since. And first question is from Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Corey, as always. I had a question about, I think it was slide 22, which was the ratio of the city's sort of capacity to pay for its obligations, which increased from 1.47 to 1.67 since 2017, sort of I guess about a 12% increase. Can you just, for me and for anyone else who's less clear on these things, that sounds to me like a hallmark of prudent financial management and of a city which is growing a more resilient financial picture over the long term. Can you explain to me if that's if that's correct, and B, what perhaps elaborate on what those ratios stand for?
Thank you, Councillor. I think you've got a good handle on it there. That the first one on the slide that talks about sustainability and your financial assets to liabilities, trending upwards in that ratio means you are putting aside some funds for potential significant projects coming down the line. It means you're managing the amounts that go into reserves and not falling behind on the ability to finance projects. We see some communities, if you fall behind on this, on having the funds available, you become over-reliant on the federal government or the provincial government to fund projects that might need to be done. So it is prudent, it is good financial planning to be thinking long-term of what projects are coming down the line, to be able to provide services and to the residents and to maintain that quality of life, and thinking, roads, water, sewer, those types of things. And those two ratios are connected in that if the sustainability ratio is trending down and the asset ratio is trending down, you find yourself in trouble, right? You've got old assets that need to be replaced and you don't have the funds available. So I think your assessment of it is that upward trend there is a positive for the city.
Okay, well, thanks for clarifying that. It's encouraging to see and appreciate city staff's help and all of us in making policy that we've managed to increase our sort of financial resilience and sustainability during a pandemic, which is no easy thing. I was wondering, as those ratios go, are those comparable to other communities in the region? I just wanted to get a sense of how those numbers stack up. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. The first ratio, which is the sustainability and that being above 1, the good news is that many of the communities that are your neighbors are in that positive position. Some might have different trends that are going on, but every community has different infrastructure needs and different levels of projects happening, and it can a big infrastructure project can cause a big swing in those ratios. The flexibility where we look at the age of the assets, I see communities around the island ranging from 60 to high 70s. So I would say at 61%, actually we might put you on the low end of some of the communities in terms of the aging of assets. Now, the caveat to that is that there's a fair amount of value on the city's books in old assets such as roads or old water systems. And 10, 12 years ago, there was an accounting exercise to put a bunch of to account for all the tangible capital assets, make sure it was all there, and a lot of older assets were recorded and are being tracked. So the biggest thing for me is not to say that you're on the low end of that range, but how is it trending? And the fact that you're holding a line is more important than maybe where you sit compared to your neighbors.
Excellent. Thanks for that answer. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks very much, Corey, for the presentation. I always get a kick out of the phrase unqualified opinion. And I think it's important to note that it doesn't mean that you're not qualified to give that opinion. It means you're giving that opinion without reservation. That's correct? Is
that is correct. Yes, it is. Maybe the better term is an unmodified opinion. A very qualified opinion, but without modification.
Well, and speaking of your qualifications, I'm just wondering if you can share with council how many years you've been doing this work, and in particular doing these audits for the city of Courtenay.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Hillian. Yeah, I have been doing municipal audits since about 2004, 2005. So somebody can do the math on that one. And we've been working with the city, I think, since 2006. And I have been involved from a student working on audits and being on site all the way to the last probably 10 years as the partner in charge of the audit.
Yes, and that represents maybe about half of Councillor Theus's tenure on this council. So he's watched you grow. But what I particularly wanted to comment on is that since I've been at this council table, there's been a number of things that have been consistent, and one of those has been the cooperation of city staff that you note in your audit report, the excellent cooperation that your firm has always noted. And I think it's a testament, particularly given that we've gone through some staffing changes in recent years. But I know the department as a whole and those people working in it continue to be diligent in the service that they provide. And I am gratified, as always, to see that reflected in your report. So I wanted to thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you, Councillor, and a big thank you to your staff. You are absolutely accurate that you've had some fantastic staff. You continue to have fantastic staff, and they do a lot of hard work for the city.
Excellent. And I just want to thank you for qualifying the fact that you started as a student, because I was thinking, yeah, you might have been fairly young when you started. Councillor McCullum.
Thanks for the presentation, Corey. I enjoyed seeing your summary of the slides with the consolidation. It's a little different than the numbers that we get to see in the budget process a couple months back. I just wanted to pick up on the flexibility ratio that you presented on the last slide. And it just kind of had me thinking about the emphasis that we put on our asset management, and how one of the goals with asset management is extending the useful life of our assets, and through good maintenance protocols and a good understanding of the age and how much useful life is left, we can prolong the amount of time before we replace them, which is what would in turn increase the capital value. And I'm just curious to hear your take on that as to whether or not a good asset management program could actually impact that ratio in a downward trend if we keep the assets in the ground or on the road longer.
Thank you, Councillor McCollum. I think that's a really great comment, is that as you try to do more with less, try to take a really hard look at those assets and is it still able to provide service for an extra 5 years or an extra 10 years, you will see that number drop and you will see, but you're striking that balance. And again, you've got a strong staff working on the asset management piece of making sure that, you know, if something needs to be replaced, it gets replaced and that you've got the long range plan in place for it, but also that certain assets can be extended and without, you know, risk to the community. And yeah, that would be a factor driving that ratio down. Absolutely.
Thanks for that answer.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Theos.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Corey, for your report. And I wanted to ask you just a couple of points. In regards to the cash on hand. Just curious that there was a significant increase there. Can you just elaborate a little bit about you know, what that means with cash on hand, please? The increase that we saw.
Sure. Thank you. So I'll give, thank you, Councillor Theos. I'll give my answer, and I would actually think that it would be a good idea to have staff have a chance to answer that one as well, because they may have not a different take, but they may be able to elaborate on it. One of the things that we're seeing with a lot of communities in the last few years, as a result of the pandemic, as a result of other levels of government funding coming available. I know we saw a provincial restart grant in 2020 that added to the value. We're seeing, as you build your reserves, as you build that you know, funding for future projects and things that you need to look at in your asset management plan, we are seeing this number climb in some communities. And that's why you see that here at the city is that there's some additional grant funding coming online that the city is right to take advantage of. You need some of those programs to help with projects. And then it's the fundings that you're putting aside in reserves that would be in your budget and your financial plan every year. So I'll pause there and maybe defer to staff if they want to comment.
So thank you, Councillor Theos, for the question. If you look at the accounts payable number, it's about $3 million higher than it was in 2020. So part of it is we haven't paid our bills yet, so we have more money in the bank account. Yeah. So for example, our school tax bill, which was $800,000, wasn't paid until January. Another, you know, point here would be we've had also higher payables due to the 5th Street Bridge project and Greenwood Trunk. Those December and November invoices didn't come in until January or February for payments. So again, there was extra cash in the bank account, but then those invoices were paid early in 2022.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. And may I ask about, I couldn't find it here, but our debt capacity, our ratio, Corey, we've had some larger projects come on board in the last couple of years, and just trying to recall, how are we doing as in terms of our debt capacity? Do we, what type of room do we have within that for carrying more debt?
Thank you, Councillor Theos. I think that I would point you to that that sustainability ratio. That was the second last slide there, and that would be the one that is heavily impacted by increasing debt. Where we see communities start to slide close to 1 or get into a negative is usually because of significant long-term debt or large projects that had to happen. So that's the one where you have, I mean, very little change year over year in that sustainability and has been steadily climbing for the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Councillor Killian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to Ms. Wicca for reminding me of something I did want to ask about. We've had a major project this year in the rehabilitation of the Fifth Street Bridge, and I believe we've increased the lifespan of that asset considerably. And I'm just wondering if that is reflected anywhere in the accounts that are being reviewed here and referenced in this discussion.
Thank you, Councilor Hillian. Yes, there's significant capital expenditures throughout 2021. I believe it was just over $10 million. So it's in those numbers. As it was still ongoing and not completed at the end of 2021, and some of the other large capital projects were also ongoing. They're in the work in progress accounts for capital, and you would start to see depreciation of those when they go in service in 2022.
So we would see next year an increased value attributed to that asset than we've had in the past. Is that correct?
That's correct. You'll have that value be transferred from the work in progress accounts to the actual, to the bridge, to the with Greenwood Trunk, to the infrastructure accounts, and then we would start to amortize it over its useful life. And as you mentioned with the bridge, a longer useful life and extended life. So you'll start to see those expenses hit the income statement in 2022.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Hillian and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to pick up on a question that Councillor Theos had asked about borrowing capacity. I know it probably relates more to the Municipal Financing Authority. I don't know if it's a legislative amount, but we have heard in the past that there is a limit to how much we can borrow. And I don't know if Ms. Wicca has that number on hand, but.
So thank you, Councillor, first for the question. We can borrow up to 25%, I believe, and we haven't filed our local government financial statements with the province yet. When we file those 2021 numbers, that recalculates what our ratio is and what percentage we're at. I believe at the end of 2020, we're about 16%. And obviously the bridge borrowing came online, but then at the same time, we're repaying debt, like the library renovation debt was repaid during 2021.
Thank you for that.
Excellent. All right. Well, it seems to have exhausted the questions at this point. Again, thanks very much, Corey, for your work on this, and of course to our staff. It does seem like we have a fairly healthy financial position, which is always nice as a municipality. And with that, if there's nothing further, it's been moved and seconded, I believe, so I'll just call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Excellent. Thanks again, Corey.
Thank you, everybody.
It's your choice if you want to stay and watch the rest of the meeting. With that, we'll move on to our DCC. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, I'll move that the council approve the City of Courtenay Annual Development Cost Charges Reserve Fund Report for the year ending December 31st, 2021.
Second.
Excellent. And Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Through Mayor and Council, the staff report starting on page 63 gives an overview on the status of our development cost charge reserves. Ms. Vike is here for discussion and questions if you have.
Excellent. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, well, everything looks in order, but I know that the DCCs are held in reserve for very specific projects, and my only question really is when are we looking at updating that reserve? And I know I ask it all the time, or not the reserve, but the bylaw. Thank you.
Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Frisch. This is a project that's been long planned, and I understand you've been asking some questions in that regard, and as you should. With the adoption of the master sewer and water strategy, the asset management group, as well as the DCC internal team that looks after that, is going to be updating that through 2023. We have a combination of population and growth projections that came as a result of the official community plan work, the development projections that upgrade the water and sewer master plan are then feathered together to update that bylaw. The process also identifies what will be development cost charge eligible projects as well. It's quite extensive work. We've done a lot of the background, but it requires some pretty extensive consultation in that work. So it's scheduled for 2023.
Oh, understandable. Thank you for that.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Frisch, for the question. I thought I saw another light, but maybe it's gone off. All right. But now I've got all sorts of lights going off. Councillor Hillian.
Well, thanks, Mayor. This is a bit of an oblique reference, but we do have Greenwood trunk construction noted in this report. And of course, we're getting a lot of questions about the completion date. And I'm just wondering if staff know when they will be in a position to confirm the completion of that much sought after project.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. Mr. Carver.
Thank you, through the mayor to Councillor Hillian. Mr. Davidson has confirmed that it's the end of May, I believe, is the scheduled completion. If there's anything that impacts that, we'll certainly give an update. We're in regular communication with the developer. As council has been made aware, it's slightly different arrangement there, where we have properties that have commenced construction. However, covenants that were required as a part of the approval process does not permit the transfer of title or occupancy for those units. The developer chose to not install a temporary lift station and relied on the Greenwood trunk. That was a strategy that was employed at that time, but with the delay and the environmental conditions that resulted in that Greenwood work, that has extended the timeline. But we're on track to complete, and the works are looking good.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, for the question, and Councillor Theos.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. Over the last few years, certainly there's been a significant amount of development in the community, and a lot of that development would lead to development cost charges being added and projects being added for future considerations. I'm just curious, especially with a lot of work in the past year, has there been a significant increase in staff time to have to deal with potential DCC projects based on the fact that we've had so much growth over the past few years?
Mr. Cartwright.
Thank you. Thanks through to Councillor Theos. There's been a significant amount of development, which means that our development support group was involved in the review and approval of projects, not necessarily DCC related specifically, but the amount of work that's gone into the background for our master sewer and water strategy, combined with the amount of infrastructure that's being developed and upgraded with those new developments, is definitely significant. The work ahead, though, is to update the bylaw specifically, which updates the cost, updates the eligible projects. So it'll be a significant amount of work, as well as the consultation required primarily with the development community for that review in 23.
All right, thanks very much for the answer. And I don't see any further questions. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. All right, and that brings us up to our council member updates, and we'll start with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think earlier I talked about some of the things I've been doing in the last 7 days, but one thing I did want to cast my mind back to was Friday afternoon, Earth Day, when the Comox Youth Climate Council invited all of us to speak with them at Sims Park, and there were some impassioned and some really important questions asked, and an opportunity for us to try and talk to youth about what we're all doing here at the different tables that we sit at. And it was great to see representatives of Courtney, Comox, Cumberland councils, the regional district, and of the school board, and our colleagues here. Just wonderful to see a majority of council and a majority of the regional district board there. I think youth were quick to point out there's always more that can be done. I think they're right in that, but I think we were able to explain that work is being done with great commitment, and particularly the work that we're doing on the OCP, I think really showed a long-term vision, which I think was reassuring to see that there's a plan in place that will last for many, many years that puts their future at the center of things. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Cole-Hamilton. And it was great to see Minister Osborne come in for the march as well and be part of the event. Councillor Frisch, Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be submitting my monthly report at the end of this month, but I did want to highlight that I had the opportunity the week before last to attend Vanier School, where they were having the official opening of a cycling parking lot. And I was invited by one of the teachers who is also a friend who I sing with in the choir. And I should mention that choir is having a concert this Saturday if any of you aren't doing anything and are looking for a good night out. But his name is Andrew Young, and Andrew's been a leader in the local cycling initiatives, taking part in the Ride for a Cure, among many other events. And he's a dedicated cyclist whose example and leadership at the school has created a significant increase in both the number of staff and students who are cycling to school. But it was really quite uplifting to see the young people there who felt like they were doing something positive for the environment and for the community by taking that action of riding their bikes. And they now have a dedicated parking lot to that purpose. I was also able to speak with some of the teachers and administration officials on hand who noted what a challenge it's been for the school community through the last couple of years of the pandemic, and the impact on students' mental health and well-being as a result of the isolation that they've experienced, and certainly emphasized what we've been hearing in other areas of the importance of bringing our community together to reestablish that sense of community that's so important, not only for our young people, but for all of our citizens. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And my son Connor was very excited to get his photo taken with you at that event. And I'll talk to my wife about the performance this weekend. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, I also just wanted to express my appreciation for the Comox Valley Youth Climate Council for organizing such a great event on Earth Day. They reached out to all the members of local government in our community and gave us the opportunity to sit and answer questions as a panel from youth in the community. And I just really enjoyed being back in person. I believe last year we did our event on Zoom, and yeah, the opportunity to connect in person and answer some questions and also hear what other folks on other councils had to say. Seeing as no one else has mentioned it, although it has come up in our meeting, we did have a very productive and I don't know what else I wanted to say about that, productive and hopefully fruitful dialogue with our MLA, Rona Ray Leonard, on Wednesday. She was very generous with her time and listened to a lot of concerns that we raised to her through various issues that come up in the community that we'd really like to see the provincial government tackle head on. And following that, we also had a meeting today with Minister Eby on similar topics around affordability and supports for folks with mental health addictions and general housing challenges in our community. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just piggyback on Councillor Cole-Hamilton's comments about Earth Day. I thought it was a great event. The Comox Youth Climate Council always does a great job with their events, and it was great to hear things highlighted. And I just wanted to mention I did have 2 or 3 people come up to me afterwards and say, wow, I had no idea all the things that have been happening with all the local governments across the board. And it just highlighted for me that we really do need to get the word out. I know we've talked about this before, but I think we do need to highlight the things that we've been doing all during COVID and currently doing around climate action. There's just a ton of great initiatives that have gone on. Much to do, but things to celebrate as well. And on a lighthearted note, I just wanted to say that some of us from council did have a nice evening out in support of Cumberland Forest Society, which we like to do, playing trivia. And it was actually on Earth Day, which was also very nice that we were celebrating the forest on Earth Day. And we're all still reveling in our first place finish in trivia. So just wanted to say that we're not just pretty faces here on Courtney Council. And even though maybe some of the information that we have in our brains is a little trivial. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Mourning, and congratulations on the win. And Councillor Theos.
It sure sounds like Will was an anchor on that team, a real genius. But yeah, congratulations, guys, representing us well. I just wanted to follow up on the update from last week, which I'm thinking that maybe everyone at council table is aware of now, as in terms of the BCGEU for the library staff. The agreement was ratified we had an emergency meeting on Wednesday, and that was ratified at that point. And it's for 4 years with the ending of that term being 2024. So there should be good to go for the next few years at the libraries, which will be good news for the patrons and for all involved, and the staff, of course. So I just wanted to leave everybody with a little extra knowledge of how that played out. And throughout the whole bargaining, there was I think a lot of good faith in the end there with the way it turned out. So I feel that we can have good, fresh direction moving forward.
Thanks very much, Councillor Theos. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks for the indulgence, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge that my neighborhood took part in an Earth Day cleanup event yesterday, organized by a stellar community volunteer, Valerie Sheriff, and the neighbors collected a significant amount of debris from vacant lands along the railway tracks and in the area of the Island Corridor lands that run down towards McPhee Meadows and such, and left it all for city crews to pick up as a prearranged thing. And I'm sure there were citizens around the community who were doing similar activities this past few days. And I just want to really credit them among the many volunteers who help make our community such a great place to live. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Councillor Hillian. Appreciate that. And I've got a bit of a list. One of the things that we've been talking about for some time and actually came up at one of our last OCP meetings was having a better relationship with our school district. So we actually met with School District 71 chair, trustees, and key staff, and just so people are aware that the school district is the largest employer in the Comox Valley, and therefore Courtney has a fleet of vehicles, all sorts of things that really impact and interfaces with the city in many ways. So just wanted to recognize that staff, both on the school district side and the city side, have been communicating, and so it was really good to get a sense of where things are and to really look at what the opportunities are going forward. I was part of a minister's meeting on basically extreme weather events and how emergency services are provided throughout the province. And obviously, given the last year we had with heat domes and flooding, the province has really stepped up and started to look at emergency services differently. One thing, for instance, would be forestry, rather than it being kind of ad hoc, to actually have a full-time year-round department to deal with it. Old Farm Market had their grand opening the other day. They've been open actually for, I think, just about a month now. And I think most of council was able to do a tour prior to opening, but it's great to see that iconic building in the downtown core is going to be able to provide local food for people, and also it's employing almost 70 people, and again, that's a big employer for Courtney. As mentioned, we had our meeting with MLA Ronna Ray Leonard. I also filled in, and I think I'm the permanent replacement going forward for our Heritage Advisory Committee. And I just want to thank Councillor Cole Hamilton for the work he's done on that committee. So just kind of talking about all the projects they're working on and challenges, and again, big thanks to staff that really help operationalize the decisions that are made there. We had the Chamber, Comox Valley Chamber AGM, for it's been many years, it feels like now, I was able to install the new directors. And I really thank the Chamber for the work that they've done throughout the pandemic. They really stepped up, and they've done a great job, and I think that helps attract new businesses as well to the Valley. The Youth Climate Political Roundtable at Sims, again, just huge kudos to the students. I've been to many events in the Comox Valley, really well organized. And I don't know that I would have had the confidence to allow politicians to decide who was going to talk. And they did, and it worked out extremely well, I think. Just really want to thank them and really hope that they continue to do the work they're doing. Our meeting with Minister Eby today. And again, I just want to thank all of council that's been to many of these meetings or provided feedback and advice. With that, we can talk about unfinished business. And so unfinished business is the situation tables. And so I can, Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. This refers to a program offered by the provincial government that our MLA presented to us at the last council meeting. And we did have, I think, a good discussion both at that time and also in a subsequent meeting with the MLA regarding what we saw, I think, as a potentially useful process. But we certainly had some questions about whether it was the city's role to take on a coordinating function in regards to that process. So I actually have a resolution I'd like to propose that I think perhaps strikes a balance between those, the positive and the qualifications that we had about that. I'd like to move that the city write to the key community agencies that might participate in situation tables and request a timely response indicating, one, their current level of collaboration on difficult clients that may be similar to this process. Two, their views on the usefulness of initiating situation tables in our community. And three, whether or not they might have the resource capacity to facilitate this process. And what I would say, Mr. Mayor, is that I don't think we want to dismiss this opportunity, which is basically a process whereby community agencies come together, look at some of the difficult situations they're working with, and collaborate to come up with plans that may be effective. It was presented to us as having some benefits in terms of having a situation, for example, that might be dealt with by the police, dealt with more effectively by a community agency, and there being a venue for that. But the intent of the motion is that rather than us take on the responsibility for actually convening this process, that we get in touch with the agencies that would be involved, determine what they're doing along these lines, whether they would see something like this as useful, and would they have the capacity to facilitate it. And to me, that seems like a responsible way to respond to both our MLA's initiative and the possibility of doing this or not. Thanks.
All right, and did that get seconded? It did, perfect. All right, Councillor Mourning.
I don't know if this would be considered a friendly or not, but just in terms of the wording, Councillor Hillian, I know you're generally a very good wordsmith, but I'd like to see some person-centered language. I think you maybe said difficult people, and I would, oh, okay. What was the wording? Could you clarify? Pardon me? Difficult client?
Councillor Hillian, he'll just maybe read it out one more time. If that's all right.
Might have been difficult client.
It was difficult clients, Councillor Mourning, and I'd be happy to change that.
Yeah,
to
maybe
something
just
that,
people experiencing difficulties, perhaps, just to have person-centered language. It just gives a connotation, difficult clients. It's just a different connotation.
Yes, and I actually was going to write difficult situations. That was my original intent, but perhaps if council's okay with that, I'm happy to accept that a friendly amendment, and it would read their current level of collaboration, working with people experiencing difficulties.
Yeah, I think just because the nature of the situation tables is about elevated risk to those folks who may be also, creating some problems for others. But I think that really they're experiencing personal difficulties. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Mourning.
Excellent. All right. And it's been moved and seconded. I don't see any further comments or questions on it. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. And we'll move into adoptions, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, Mayor, I'll move that council adopt the 2026 Consolidated Financial Plan bylaw number 3060/2022.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And then we have first, second, and third, and Councillor McCollum.
I'll move that council give first, second, and third reading to tax rates bylaw number 3061/2022.
All right. And are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously, which leaves us with one last thing. All those in favor? Any opposed? We are